The creative process. So for me, I think of ideas that, like concepts or issues that I want to speak to, and which is not actually always the easiest thing to do, or because there's so much going on that you're thinking about constantly, or something that I can then represent, which I think to me is always the biggest question is, for instance, people say, oh, you have a daughter now, does she influence your artwork or what have you? And right now, no.
Okay.
Because I don't know how to, I don't have a filter set for that yet, you know what I mean? To kind of filter those emotions or thoughts into some output form.
Okay.
So, I guess kind of once I kind of lock in on something, for instance, whether it's the Target series I was doing, where thinking about like being a black male and feeling like a target and kind of analyzing my life or what have you. It kind of just, it can begin to take shape, and then I'll kind of choose from there, how can I best represent it, whether, does it need to be drawings, and if they're drawings, what's the energy that it's going to be, or how it's going to feel. If it's, if it's wood, what's that going to mean? And so basically through kind of deciding what surface or what medium will kind of give the effect that will closest represent what I'm thinking.
Okay.
In a sense.
Okay.
So of late, I've been doing more wood and three-dimensional type pieces. Drawing, and I'm pretty much going to bring everything back to drawing, because that's the show that we're here for. So drawing, for me, is the basis of it all, and even in thinking about through which medium I'm going to do, or I'm drawing it out the whole time.
Okay.
So, which I guess is actually a great point to kind of start with, is that for me, drawing is the basis of all of the work.
Well, you're incredibly talented, so that probably helps a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Where was I going to go?
Yes,
I think I was fading from there anyway.
Is drawing or painting harder?
Is drawing or painting harder? I would say
Draw to paint.
it's a combination. Drawing, I feel like drawing exposes people, exposes skill, or in some cases lack of skill, because not everyone is as strong with with pencil or graph or pen or what have you. But then they might be able to paint, and and you wouldn't know that. But yet, for me, for instance, and we talked about this on the phone the other day, kind of, is as far as painting realism, I can draw realistically, pretty well. Like, I feel fairly confident in that. But painting, there's certain things, detail-wise, then you're bringing in color, you're bringing in all these other factors, as well as a brush that, size and angle and touch. And, that hand that you can draw with the pencil tip that, you can get the fingers nice and good. Now you're talking about taking something, let's say that wide, what have you, and trying to get the same effect. And so then it's about touch and what have you. So it's all about practice, I guess. And I see people, and then I study other people's paintings and see how they handle different things. So I kind of go back and forth, because then some things are just easier to paint than they are to draw. Like for me, painting abstract is easier than it is to draw abstractly.
You can get an MFA without ever taking a drawing class.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, but actually not really though, because by the time you're getting an MFA, it's not about it's not about learning the technique at that
But I think
point.
you can get a bachelor's there without taking drawing.
Now
If you decide that you are, if you're majoring in painting, I don't think you have to take drawing classes.
Yeah, that's different. because your bachelor's degree that's more your foundation work. Your master's by that time is more about your own work and your own process and your own thinking of it through it. And so, because I had a friend that came through our program at GW, and she still wanted to learn how to paint. And I was like, no one's gonna teach you how to learn, how to paint.
She's in a master's program?
But mind you, I mean, and granted, I only realized that because I was, I went back to school 10 years after.
Before you, right. You were doing all that before you got your.
Well, yeah,
Right.
you were already a
Right.
working,
Already
getting paid
established.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I had came straight out of undergrad, which she did, and not knowing what you don't know, like you haven't lived your practice, you haven't been working, you haven't been making art. You're fresh out of school and still expecting to be taught.
Masters.
Right. You're still expecting to be taught things versus at the master's level, it's more about how you
already
think
know,
about what
right.
you're creating. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
So I mean, it still grows, and your work will still change or should change. Like mine totally shifted from what I was doing before,
Right.
but that came through just the process of my already knowing I started doing this out of making surfaces to then paint on, but then I couldn't bring myself to paint on it, and it wasn't this particular one because this actually has color, but the first pieces of the wooden based works, it had the kind of that antique-y brown, I guess that's more on the side of the piece that you can somewhat see underneath, and I had scratched into it, I had marked it here, marked it there, and then couldn't bring myself to then apply the paint to then draw that to paint whatever image or what have you. I feel like I've told you this before already. I feel like
we've done
recap
that's
some
all
of that
right.
shit.
I was just
Because you haven't told the other people,
Right,
so
right.
it's
So
good.
I'm gonna keep going.
We're
but
sharing.
nonetheless.
Not about
So,
this
yeah.
one.
What did you make you start picking up wood? I mean, you'd worked on canvas, you'd done a lot of work on paper. What was the first, I'm going to work on this wood?
I've used wood as a
As a substrate,
before,
right.
so it wasn't anything new, so to speak. It was really, I think I wanted the wood grain behind the
Did
the
you know
painting. I think.
Did you know when you started onto the road for your master's you were going to do your thesis on wood?
Oh no! I thought I was going in as just a regular painter, and gonna keep drawing and painting, printmaking. They told me that they didn't have a printmaking studio there and what have you. So before going in, but he said so if you're looking
Life's
to do
choices.
that, if you're looking to focus on
Well, he's
that,
got his
we don't
own
have it.
press, so that helps.
So and I told him that I was like, I'm not worried about that, but I just expected to be painting and drawing as I was before, but it was just like that evolution through critique and process and growth, I guess.
And prior to starting on the wood, you were doing a lot of different series, and sometimes doing pieces on both paper and canvas within a series. What made you decide to do both? I mean, were you just trying to do smaller pieces onto paper?
Two things. I think one, working at a gallery, I saw a lot of work on paper that was like oil on paper or acrylic on paper, and I was like, how are they doing that? So it was kind of just kind of exploring what I was seeing. But even before then, it was also just because I would work in gouache or watercolor as studies for acrylic or oil painting. If it was oil painting, I would do watercolor. If it was gouache, then the canvas version would be acrylic, because of the drying times and how I rated them as similar, or I guess parallel. But so yeah, that was how.
What mediums haven't you done that you'd still like to try?
I'm moving into more. I want to move more into some mold making works, plaster kind of mold making material, fiberglass stuff. It's been in the sketchbooks for a while. It's in a few minor mock-ups have taken place, and now I'm about to kind of like go off in that direction based off a piece that I just did on a ceramic bowl for a fundraiser, and essentially taking that ceramic piece and etching into it and making it look aged. And this is actually kind of like a real roundabout story, but so there's these horns at the Library of Congress that my friend works at, and he showed me them, and they're in like the vaults that you can't go into, well, except like under lock and key. But so he took me in there, he pulled them out, and there are these maps that were made in the war of, it was like 1870 something, and there are these maps on these horns, like they're literally on like engraved into horns. And I thought that was like the craziest thing. And so I want to do some work kind of based off of that. So like I already have the horn shape, 2 horn shapes that I've made out of styrofoam that I'll then layer on and make this etching thing. But I realized, I guess my point is I found a solution to that through working on the ceramic piece that I was doing for this fundraiser. And so anyway, that's coming down the line. So you'll kind of,
So we have something to look forward to.
yeah,
What
that'll be
war?
kind of
The horn.
What in the maps?
I forgot what it was a French. My history is not the greatest, but I can't remember. But it was a French American War, I think.
French and Indian War?
French and
That was earlier.
Indian. Thank you. Yeah. But there's several different. There's like 3 different horns,
Okay.
and they're actually, one of them is online,
Okay.
and they have pictures of it, from all different angles, so you can kind of take a
Is
look
that
at
the
it.
Library of Congress?
Mm-hmm. Library of Congress, the archives, yeah. So anyway, so history, well, this is a total side note, I don't think it has anything to do with the question, but mixing, kind of paralleling, or mixing aspects of historic events and current issues is kind of what I'm focusing on now, and kind of taking this old and the new and mixing them together, which is essentially kind of how you get this old beat up kind of sign that has to do with the issue, a current, issue.
Yeah, can you talk more about that series? That
The Target series?
Yeah, the Target series. Yeah, you mentioned that a couple times, and you've mentioned your thematic expressions.
Right.
Can you talk about a particular series, such as the Target series?
Sure. So the Target series is probably one of the, I guess, closest personal series to me, because I'm 34 now, and like I now have a little bit of distance to kind of look back and analyze my life more so than I did when I was 20, right? So it came out of a song by Kendrick Lamar, one of today's rappers that like kind of blew up real quick, and it was about the idea of, he had a hook where it was like essentially like riding around with his friends, and all we want to do is see 21. That's a very paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact words, but it was the idea of hoping to see 21. And that was a very, very specific goal I remember growing up. And so when I heard that, I mean, it always resonated with me. And like so it was kind of really
when you say
focusing on
21, you don't mean like craps, like you're playing
No,
Atlantic
age.
City.
Age.
You mean
Yeah.
you reached 21
Exactly.
years of age.
Exactly.
Because he was worried or concerned about potentially
not seeing the age of 21.
not getting out of his teenage years.
Right.
And that was the reality that you were living in.
Exactly. And
Right.
so I remember, even though I grew up in the suburbs, not a violent area,
Right.
what have you. Mind you, I would always run into the instance of, hey, you look like someone I know.
Right.
Or aren't you, and that
Right.
would always like freak me out, because you never know what that situation that I reminded
Right.
of,
Right.
So, and another side note, I bought a car from this cat in DC, in the hood essentially, and it was a Caprice police package
Right.
rolling.
Right.
Yeah,
The police package, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he knew, or
Right.
what he'd got into.
Right.
So now I'm riding in this car, and you hear someone say, "Hey, aren't you?" So that immediately, that idea of feeling like a target amongst your own,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And than police, and
Right.
which is specifically this one has to do with the police. And so just that idea of the target and coming from all angles, and
Yeah,
and
like
the
you felt like
idea-
Public Enemy.
Exactly.
Public Enemy #1.
Exactly.
Their first album was the Scope.
Right.
The black guy in the parachute.
Which I
Yeah.
thought about a lot, and I don't know, trying not to like exactly replicate that one. But,
Right. But that's the
idea-wise,
motif that
exactly.
you were coming along. Yeah.
Exactly, and so I've kind of incorporated, done it in different ways essentially, but that was the basis of that work, was just thinking through those feelings and thoughts, and yeah, essentially.
Well, if I may ask, was there any kind of catharsis or understanding that you came to from approaching this
Yeah, it was
issue?
that it made me realize the damaged psyche of black males in this country, specifically black males and black females. Through talking to a friend of mine about it, like she, began to reckon it, and I never thought about it that from her perspective. But for me, it was thinking about like my psyche when I walk past cats that look like me, and I kind of prepare myself. That's an issue. You know what I mean?
Right.
Prepare to not know,
Right.
If it's at night or even though, and I'll say what's up. I'm a greeter, but you never know what that how that comes back. A homeboy of mine in his apartment complex did the same thing. Walked past. Hey, what's up, man? Give me all your shit. You know what I mean? Just that quick, he's robbed at gunpoint in his own, on the car, and this just happened. You know what I mean? So it's that's damage, right? When you've lived this way when you've grown up and begin to kind of think about at what age do you put on that? Do you realize that target, and then what does that then make you? How do you react in the world after that? Like young cats walking around sagging pants and not really caring. Why do you think that is? Because they're not expecting
To see 21.
to see 21. You know what I mean? There's a very real possibility that homeboys haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always worrying about being that statistic of, man, he's doing good. He has good grades. He was on his way to Syracuse. He was in Syracuse, and shot over some shoes or over
In the wrong place at the wrong time.
It could be
exactly.
like the guy in
Yeah.
Brooklyn who was minding his own business at a bus stop and caught a bullet because it was meant for the guy standing next to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, these are things that, and so it was thinking about that and also realizing that if I'm like this, and I'm not in the hood, you know what I mean? I don't live my life there, wasn't growing up there. And then you have rappers, for instance, that essentially hip hop runs the world right now, culturally. You have young black males that are, singing, putting this out, and they all have experienced the same thing and more.
Some of them. Not all of them.
Well, no.
Some of them are fronting.
Well, no,
Because they didn't come out of
you gotta
that
think about
environment
though.
either.
Yeah, whether they came out of it or not, they still, they still are looked at in the same way. Like, I didn't come out of that environment. It's like if I started rapping, I'd just be one of them as well that didn't live it, but I realize I'm still affected.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's more so realizing that you don't even, we don't think about it. Because it's your daily life, you know what I mean? You don't, it's like how, slaves in slavery didn't always think about the fact that it was slavery or freedom necessarily, because like this was life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Of course, I shouldn't say I didn't live that, but you get my point.
Well, to that point, when you did the Flag series, you were dealing with a lot of the same issues, but you were dealing with them historically. How did that affect you? What did that come out of?
The Flag series, again, came out of a lot of kind of historically, anger, essentially. When I was in college, the first flag I did was in college, my senior year, and so I didn't realize I could expand on the series at that time. But essentially, now, then I, years later revisited some of the ideas and imagery, and it was coming from a standpoint of not being angry as much, but realizing that a conversation needs to happen about this. You know, so it was more of understanding what's taking place, understanding that, you know, my contemporaries, at least, definitely, obviously weren't there, you know, to blame.
And in many cases didn't know about it.
Right. So it's more so, and some of them, you know, like there's this one particular flag I'm thinking of, you know, I circled, you know, the people in the crowd and pointed to say, like, your father, guy handing my father, or, you know what I mean, or your father, my father, reversing it. And just understanding that, you know, like I'm generations removed from it to a degree. But realizing that, you know, essentially a conversation just needs to kind of come about and really kind of discuss these different things. And
As history continues to repeat itself.
Yes.
right. So, but also realizing that, you know, things have changed to the point where, like I said, you know, a hip hop concert now is not all black. You know, it easily 50% white, if not more. You know what I mean? Which is actually something I was listening to the other day. They're talking about it from the standpoint of this guy who, you know, from Chevy Chase, Maryland, who's now on like Hot 97, and essentially he is a powerful figure in the world of hip hop now. A white guy, Jewish, you know, that grew up in the suburbs listening to hip hop, you know, and they're just talking about the fact that, you know, like, what does that mean for today's age and cultural relations, et cetera, et cetera. And, well, I mean, that kind of goes off into a whole nother side.
The older ones of us in this room remember when everybody had afros, regardless of color.
See, yeah, I mean,
You know, it's that
and we
cultural kind of, you know, continuum.
don't.
And we were more united, you know, by people who were Jewish people, many of them went down to, like Jews went down to, you know, the South during.
Freedom marches.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
they definitely.
yeah, I mean, we're working
Definitely.
together. Now
Died
we're,
together.
I think, being fragmented and I think intentionally, I mean, divided.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah,
so-
I don't know. I still think it's become much more the have-have-nots as opposed to the color.
Oh, but that there's a relationship
But it's
between
always
color
been-
and
that's always
having.
been- economics has always underlaid the color issue.
Well,
It's
there's
always there.
There's the blacks have lost much more in this whole economic downturn, the black middle class and the white has, but, I mean, if you look at the.
We still have a
income
middle class?
What, we don't know, no.
Yeah,
They call it that.
Just checking. I
No, no,
thought I
no.
missed the newsflash.
There's a statistical, yeah,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
it doesn't really exist.
It's all.
But as
it's
we digress,
economics
talk
is
a
all
little
in
bit
it.
more about
Yeah.
where the raw idea comes from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I've had artists tell me they wake up thinking of something. You know, just first thought of the day, and it ends up being on paper or on canvas.
Yeah, it's literally sometimes, I mean, just that quickly out of the blue, or realizing, like for instance, when I heard that lyric of the song and it just resonated with me, and sometimes, I mean, it's almost in some cases like, you know, if you think of the brain like a kitchen, you know, one ingredient comes in, and you know, you keep moving through life, another ingredient comes in, now you got bread. You know, and now you're ready to
Put them together.
you know, yeah, exactly. Put them together. Now you can bake something.
Yeah.
No, when do you do your best baking then? do you do your best baking when you're dreaming, or when you're awake, or you know, like for real, like
Right.
do you dream while you're painting? You know?
For me,
Or when you're doing your woodwork.
I
Yeah.
do a lot of working. A lot of it comes through working.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually read watching some documentary. I think it was Francis Bacon. I think said that you know, like that whole like inspired artist,
Right.
you know, magical sprinkle dust.
Right.
Like no, like that shit comes when you're working. You know, like, most of the
Yeah,
ideas-
you get in the zone.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
when you're like when I'm banging, you know, the wood together and scratching and talking, like I'm talking to myself the whole time.
Right.
And so, you know, that's when as you make a mark and you think, oh, if I take this, you know, I could take this on the next piece and take this a whole different direction.
Right.
Or when you stop and look back and you're wondering, do I paint this with spray paint, or do I rub it down with brownish oil?
Right.
Two different directions
Right.
equal two different potential pieces.
Right.
So now you realize now this series has just grown from 1 to 2.
Right.
Man, what if if I just break this whole corner off?
Right.
So but all of that comes through working. Even I would say like that's where most of the ideas within a series will come from, is just the branches that happen that you discover while working. But even the seeds, again, kind of come from regular living, and kind of taking in. Very rarely, like I'm not one that will like wake up in the middle of the night and write down something because I dreamt it and I want to remember it. I've always like kind of envied those people, like, because I know people that do that, like will think of it or be able to remember it and work from it. But mine is essentially just a combination of primarily issues I'm thinking about, historical things that have always kind of resonated with me, experiences now, like I spent some time in Italy, going into my senior year of college.
Nice.
And going around Rome, for instance. I remember specifically going to Rome was like a huge deal for me, because something like it seemed like the big culmination. And at the time, I'm growing my dreads. I'm listening to heavy roots reggae and realizing that Babylon is Rome in the music.
Right. Yes.
Like it clicked all the way there.
Yes.
And so I get there, and as I'm walking the city and seeing all these obelisks topped and capped with the cross, and I'm like, so at the top they're topped with the cross and capped, but the hieroglyphics all through it, and realizing, that historically that they were taken from,
they were usurped from Alexandria and brought to Rome,
and brought to Rome as symbols of resurrection and what have you, and for the neighborhoods, almost like essentially restoring neighborhoods, etc. And bang, and I'm like, but these these are stolen,
right?
The whole, all of that, just so that for me, for instance, I'm still thinking of, and including it in works that I'm making, or finding current parallels to those historic things that I've learned, and trying to kind of do like mashups essentially.
Right.
So I think I'm always kind of in the background thinking about, like, my current work is thinking about like what's the future antique,
our iPhones.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But so for instance now I have, but yet somehow it's like, what's the future antique? What about the tradition of passing down heirlooms, etc., pieces that have a story that, like that cabinet or that desk that, was your grandfather's desk, and, like I always wanted something that was, that meant something, that was that kept coming down, and I don't have it. I feel like a lot of other people don't have it, so I'm gonna make it, and as I'm making it, the story will come through it. And others may, I don't know if it'll resonate as, an antique story that from other people's perspective. But that's kind of what I'm working through right now, is just thinking through the idea of traditions, antiques, heirlooms, and what the future antique will be. And as I'm making these wooden shapes, like cabinets in particular, like it's going to be like this one that I just recently realized I'm going to make a speaker.
Right.
Because like right now it's all about the bass or the music, right? But in this antique cabinet that I made, and you open it up and it's a speaker, and what does that mean? What's it going to play? What does it say? What does it sound? Doesn't matter what it sounds, because it's more about this. Anyway, so these are the things I'm cycling through. But that's kind of, I guess, more thought process, creative process right there for you.
Nice.
Sounds like you're doing a story
So,
yet. sounds like you're also including story, and I
It
think
is.
in working with kids, as I've done, how they don't know story,
Mm-hmm. But
family, history.
exactly.
Not story's been. It brings us together.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, so the idea is for me, like, I'm creating these fictional artifacts, is what I call them,
Yeah.
because for me, like, I want you to look at the piece. I'm not trying to fool you or make you think that this was
Right.
found in the street
Right.
Right.
and discarded, but I want you to think about it when you first look at it and begin to kind of question, well, why does it look this way? It kind of looks like it may have been just, here and
Yeah.
had this whole life and history associated to it,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's about creating that narrative for your own self, essentially, and which kind of also, I'll say, goes back to, for me, when discussing artwork and talking with people, is always wanting people to look at it and analyze it for themselves,
Right.
and realizing, like, whatever you say and think about the work is just as direct and important as what I say and think about the work. Like,
Develop your own
you
story.
always hear, like, oh, I don't, but I don't know, and then it's like, no, you look at something and you have thoughts, and if it resonates with you, then
What story does it tell you?
Right, it's talking to you in some form or fashion, which is just as relevant as to how it speaks to me. So it's that idea of putting the power in the viewer's hands as well to create that narrative for themselves.
I'm glad she brought up